operate on it, as long as we can be the ones that are the provider of it. That's what needs to happen. So within the federal government, within state and locals, within National Guard, within companies, you see some form of consolidation occurring as far as data centers go, and the rationale for that. So we then have this idea that data, because it is oriented in space and time, and the geometries are right and the taxonomies are correct, you now have fusion. And by fusion, you now see patterns. You now see things that you didn't know existed. You now see things that you should have known. You now see things, you can anticipate things that are going to happen next. You can make sense of the world better than we have done in the past. So as a result of these better decisions and anticipation, new patterns, you now know what I know. You can almost know it when I know it. You can make sense of it with what you also know. So you can put all of these things together as an aspect of your daily life, of your business, and you see, many of the companies that have had success, retail companies who have had success, have used some of these principles upon where to put up their stores and who to market to. And so these are things that we'll see more of in a bigger enterprise approach, particularly causing some tensions, of course, between states and locals and feds and institutions and businesses. We have separations. We have these things that we want to maintain. And so figuring out the proper balance between these and is really going to be a part of that big enterprise piece. So I was also asked to do a little vignette, and so I'll give you a little vignette. It's a little bit dated, but it still holds. In 2004, 2005, in Mosul, we had the first of the 25th Stryker Brigade combat team that was operating in a chaotic environment. What they thought they were going into a week before their deployment changed dramatically. All the police disappeared on them. All the police stations were taken over by Al-Qaeda in Iraq. It didn't look like a coin environment at all. It looked like a combat environment. Everything that they had thought they knew, they didn't know any longer. It had been a very peaceful area, and it now turned out to be immensely chaotic. So they had data coming out. They had sensors. They had folks providing them information. They had all sorts of data, and it was all coming in through various stovepipes. That data, you tear your hair out looking at the data and knowing that inside there is a jewel. Inside there, you know where you have to go to quell the insurgency, but you can't get to it. You don't know the key. So one of the things that they asked us to do was to help them. They first had to help themselves. One was taxonomy. They had to help themselves with what it was that they called the Blue Mosque, because some people called it the White Mosque, if you were a different part of the Muslim religion. So they had to come up with a taxonomy on the way that they called things, and they did that. And with that, then we were able to give them a simple little web tool that allowed them to geospatially track the trends, track the information that was important to them, whether it be who was the imam at the mosque, where did he live, what were his allegiances, what was his cell phone, those kinds of things, down to who was selling gas, who was selling used cars, those kinds of things. So the commander then used that simple tool, very simple tool, to go after his critical pieces of information. Say, I want to know about X. And then his platoon leaders would come back and fill it out and say, this is what we found out. That exposed patterns, and it prepared not just their unit for execution, but it prepared the unit that came in behind them. General Rodriguez mentioned after the change, the switch out of units, the sharing of information between the 1st of the 25th and the next Stryker brigade that came in from Alaska, that was the smoothest transition that had ever taken place, and that they actually saved lives because they had shared this information. So that's the vignette. I would point to a couple of things. If you haven't read Major General Flynn's article that he wrote with a few other folks on intel in Afghanistan, please read that. It shows you the problem. It doesn't show you how he's technically trying to solve a problem, but it shows you because he doesn't have the technical solution, and he doesn't have the governance pieces in place, and he doesn't have the standards in place, what he has to do in order to achieve fusion. And it's daunting. And the other one is a book by Peter Mansour, Baghdad at Sunrise, and this gives you an idea of the tremendous amounts of data that are available to decision makers in the military today, and then the challenges of putting that together in a time and in a place. Both of those really highlight the problem, as well as give you some idea of where we're going for a solution. And it begs for this geospatial enterprise. I think, at this point, I'd like to just, if there were a couple of notes that I took from the panel. Handhelds, absolutely, I talked about that with, survey and level of input. So you no longer have a gold standard from a national agency that is being promulgated as the best knowledge of the battlefield or of a disaster. You now have people on the ground who have eyes on the target, on the disaster, or on the battlefield, and they have the best knowledge. And so they have the ability to input that and then to share that with all of us. Convergence, that clearly this is convergence. It's but there are limits, and I would talk about futurist versus realist. I'm a futurist in my day-to-day business, but when I go start digging around my backyard, I'm a realist. I call misutility, and I go in and I find out where that stinking stuff is, as opposed to where it was supposed to be. And we find that throughout our engineering business over and over. I think that the last piece is back to that value proposition, and then I'll close and I'll let you ask some questions. That the value proposition is efficiency and effectiveness. We're going to save dollars and we're going to save lives by doing this. And I would point to you, we in the Department of Defense, we in the Department of the Army are not the leaders in this business. We are following. I would point you to counties such as Somerset, New Jersey. There are a number of states that in Pennsylvania and Florida that do a wonderful job of starting to bring their data and information together so that it's not only available for decision makers, it's also available for the public. So with that, I'll close and open it for questions.